Dr. Elena Vance walked through the sterile silver hallways of the high-security quantum physics research facility. The silence was deafening. Tonight, only the cold, rhythmic hum of the ventilation system broke the silence. She swiped her security card at Laboratory Room 7. This was the sanctuary of Dr. Eris Thorne, her mentor, and the leading mind in quantum mechanics. The heavy steel door slid open, revealing a room bathed in the amber glow of idle computer screens. Dr. Thorne was not there. The room was in perfect order, except for a half-empty cup of lukewarm coffee on his desk. His glasses, which he never went anywhere without, sat next to his keyboard. Elena felt a sudden icy shiver. A high-security facility, guarded by biometric locks and armed guards, had become a hollow shell. Her mentor had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the ghost of his unfinished work. Frantic for answers, Elena spent hours bypassing network firewalls, searching for security footage or logs. What she found was far more terrifying than a single disappearance. Deep within encrypted databases, a chilling pattern emerged. Dr. Thorne was not the first. Over the past 3 weeks, more than 40 top-tier scientists from various fields of physics and aerospace engineering had vanished across the globe. From Tokyo to Munich and Boston to Moscow, the brightest minds of a generation were disappearing one by one, like stars snuffed out in the night sky. The international political landscape was already a powder keg. This unprecedented wave of disappearances was the spark that set it alight. The United States and its primary rival, the Eastern Coalition, immediately pointed fingers. Both superpowers accused each other of state-sponsored kidnapping, claiming the rival nation was stealing intellectual assets to gain a decisive military advantage. As the days bled into weeks, the accusations grew louder and more aggressive. With media broadcasting reports of troop movements and naval blockades, aircraft carriers were deployed to contested waters, and strategic bombers were placed on high alert. The two rival governments mobilized military forces to the highest levels seen since the Cold War. Streets in major capitals were filled with anxious citizens, fearing that the long-standing peace was about to shatter permanently. The world stood on the precipice of a massive conflict, driven by the paranoia of stolen personnel and lost technological secrets. Elena watched the news feeds on her multiple monitors, her heart heavy with the realization that a global war could erupt at any second. The public believed this was a battle for dominance, but Elena knew there was something far deeper and far more sinister happening behind closed doors. During the darkest hours of the night, her terminal flashed with an incoming alert. It was an encrypted transmission from Dr. Thorne's automated distress system. Elena rushed to decrypt the heavily corrupted audio file. Through a chaotic mix of static, she heard the voice of her mentor. Dr. Thorne sounded breathless, terrified, and incredibly weak. He spoke in fragments, warning of a silent purge sweeping the globe. The audio cut out periodically, but before the transmission collapsed entirely, it broadcasted a sequence of coordinates pointing to a remote location in international waters. The message ended with a final, desperate warning. Do not trust the official narrative, for the purge is not what it seems. Elena memorized the coordinates and reached for her external data drive, but a shadow fell across her desk. Dr. Julian Ross, her trusted colleague, stood in the doorway with an agonizing look of guilt, holding a data extraction device. Julian refused to look her in the eyes, confessing in a trembling voice that he had been compromised. Elena looked at him, remembering the years of shared research, late nights in the lab, and mutual trust that now felt like nothing but a cruel illusion. An unknown entity had targeted his family, blackmailing him into spying on Elena and stealing her research. They knew she had decrypted the signal and were coming. He begged her to hand over the coordinates, promising it was the only way to keep them alive. Elena felt a profound sense of betrayal wash over her, realizing that the conspiracy had reached her inner circle. Before Julian could act, the lights flickered violently. A low hum grew into a roar as an electromagnetic anomaly surged through the room, shattering the monitors. The air smelled of ozone and burnt copper, and the floor vibrated beneath her feet, as if the earth itself were protesting. Julian screamed as a blinding blue light enveloped him, before vanishing into dead silence. Julian was gone, leaving only empty space. Elena stood alone in the ruined lab, clutching the drive, her mind racing with a mixture of terror and resolve. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The smoke from the shattered monitors slowly cleared, leaving Dr. Elena Vance alone in the darkness of the ruined laboratory. The air still crackled with static electricity, a stinging reminder of the anomaly that had just swallowed Dr. Julian Ross. She clutched the encrypted data drive to her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew she could not stay. The extraction team Julian warned her about would arrive at any moment. Slipping into the shadows of the service tunnels, Elena escaped into the freezing rain of the city. She needed to reach the coordinates, but she could not do it alone. The world was tearing itself apart, and she was a lone physicist fleeing from shadows. Her escape was cut short in a dim alleyway 3 blocks from the facility. A figure stepped out of the downpour, a firearm drawn but pointed safely at the ground. It was Agent Chen, an operative from the Eastern Coalition, the very superpower her government accused of orchestrating the abductions. Elena braced for a fight, but Chen did not attack. Instead, he spoke in a low, urgent voice, revealing that he had been tracking the same electromagnetic anomalies. His sister, a brilliant aerospace engineer, had vanished under identical circumstances 2 weeks prior. Chen had realized, through his own intelligence channels, that neither of their governments actually knew what was happening. Both superpowers were blindly accusing each other to hide their own terrifying ignorance and to prepare for a war they felt was inevitable. Realizing they were chasing the same ghost, they formed an uneasy alliance, bound by a shared desperation to find the truth. Their journey took them far beyond the reaches of civilization, deep into the northern expanses of international waters. They traveled by cargo ship, and then by a small, unmarked snow vehicle across endless plains of shifting, treacherous ice. The wind howled like a wounded animal, throwing sheets of blinding snow against their small transport. During the long, freezing hours of the trek, the silence between them began to thaw. Wrapped in heavy thermal gear, Elena and Chen shared their grief and isolation. Elena spoke of the guilt she felt over Julian, wondering if she could have saved him from his desperate betrayal and the profound emptiness left by the disappearance of Dr. Eris Thorne. Chen spoke of his sister, their childhood, and his absolute determination to bring her home, even if it meant betraying his own nation. In the dead of the polar night, 2 enemies became partners, united by a fragile warmth of shared humanity. Finally, the coordinates led them to a massive, jagged shelf of ice. Hidden beneath the frozen crust was the entrance to a decommissioned Cold War-era subterranean military base. But as they bypassed the outer hatch, Elena noticed something impossible. The base was not dead. It pulsed with a deep, rhythmic vibration that resonated through the soles of their boots. The security systems were active, using cutting-edge quantum encryption that Elena had to carefully bypass using her customized decryption drive. Chen kept watch, his combat training evident in his fluid, silent movements. As they descended deeper into the earth, the temperature began to rise, and the walls transitioned from rusted iron to sleek, modern composite materials. They were stepping into a highly advanced, hidden kingdom powered by a strange, humming energy source that defied any conventional physics Elena had ever studied. They crept through the ventilation shafts, looking down into a cavernous, multi-layered subterranean complex. Elena gasped, pressing her hand to her mouth to stifle the sound. Below them, in a sprawling, state-of-the-art laboratory facility, were the missing scientists. Dr. Eris Thorne was there, gesturing toward a giant, ring-like structure that glowed with a soft, pulsing blue light. Chen saw his sister working at a console nearby, but there were no guards, no chains, and no signs of duress. The scientists from rival nations, who had spent their lives competing in secret government programs, were working side-side, sharing data and laughing in warm camaraderie. They were not prisoners. They were collaborators, operating under a highly organized, unified command structure that transcended national borders. Before Elena and Chen could comprehend the scene, the heavy steel doors behind them sealed shut with a deafening metallic clang. Armed security personnel in unmarked black uniforms emerged from the shadows, their weapons trained on the intruders. From the center of the security detail stepped the facility director, a cold, imposing figure with an air of absolute authority. The director looked at them with a mixture of amusement and pity. The director explained that the geopolitical tension on the surface was nothing but a grand illusion, a carefully managed distraction. The global elite from both governments had secretly pooled their resources to fund this project, orchestrating the silent purge to gather the greatest minds on Earth for a singular, desperate purpose. Elena demanded to know who was behind this global deception, her voice trembling with anger. The director stepped aside, and another figure stepped forward from the shadows of the control room. Elena felt the air leave her lungs. Standing before her, dressed in a pristine white lab coat and looking at her with a mixture of regret and pride, was her own estranged father. He looked older, his hair silvered by time, but his eyes held the same intense, unwavering focus she remembered from her childhood. He was the leader of the entire operation, the mastermind behind the disappearance of her mentor, and the silent purge that had brought the world to the brink of annihilation. Elena stared at her father, her voice catching in her throat. The man who had taught her to love science, who had vanished years ago, stood before her in the harsh, artificial light of the underground sanctuary. He took a slow step forward, his hands open in a peace gesture, but Elena stood her ground, her fists clenched. She demanded to know how he could be part of such a monstrous deception. Her father sighed, a heavy, tired sound that carried the weight of the entire world. He motioned toward a massive projection on the wall, showing a simulation of a dark anomaly passing through the solar system. He explained that a catastrophic cosmic event, a localized gravitational wave of unprecedented power, was heading directly toward Earth. It would arrive in less than 2 years, stripping away the atmosphere and rendering the surface uninhabitable. The world governments, he claimed, could not handle the truth without descending into immediate, chaotic madness. Therefore, a secret coalition of the global elite had funded this sanctuary, a massive underground shield designed to preserve a select few. The silent purge was not a kidnapping, he said, but a rescue mission to bring the greatest minds together to build the survival shield. Elena felt a cold dread settle in her chest as the scale of the betrayal washed over her. Her father looked at her with pleading eyes, offering her a guaranteed spot in the sanctuary. He told her she could continue her research, live in safety, and help rebuild humanity. But there was a condition. She had to remain silent, turn her back on Agent Chen, and allow the rest of humanity, billions of innocent souls, to perish in complete ignorance. Elena looked back at Agent Chen, who stood silent, his jaw clenched, waiting for her decision. The choice was clear, but agonizing. To accept was to survive, but at the cost of her soul. To refuse was to face certain death. Elena looked her father in the eyes and told him that a humanity built on the foundations of cowardice and abandonment was not a humanity worth saving. Before her father could respond, a sudden alarm blared through the cavernous room, bathing the laboratory in a bloody red glow. On the monitors, a familiar face appeared. It was Dr. Julian Ross, who had not vanished into thin air but had been captured and forced to work on the core. Locked inside the main power chamber, his face pale but determined, Julian spoke through the intercom. He confessed his deep remorse for his past betrayal, refusing to let them sacrifice the rest of the world. With a final, apologetic look, Julian bypassed the safety protocols, triggering a massive core overload. The energy surge disabled the facility's security grid, unlocking every door, and broadcasted a live, undeletable feed of the entire facility, including her father's confession, to every television screen across the globe. The truth was out, and Julian had paid the ultimate price, disappearing in a flash of brilliant energy as the control room shook. Chaos erupted instantly. The security guards panicked as the alarm sirens wailed and the walls began to tremble. Elena and Agent Chen seized the moment of confusion. Chen moved with lethal efficiency, disarming the nearest guards, while Elena rallied the frightened scientists. Dr. Eris Thorne and Chen's sister joined them, realizing the facility was collapsing. The unstable energy core hummed with a deafening, high-pitched shriek, threatening to detonate the base. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes as chunks of ice fell from the ceiling. Elena, Chen, and the liberated scientists fought their way through the collapsing corridors toward the emergency exits. Behind them, Elena saw her father watching her escape, a mixture of sorrow and acceptance in his eyes as he refused to leave his dying creation. They reached the surface just as the ground beneath them began to cave in. Above ground, the freezing Arctic wind howled, but the world was already changing. The live broadcast had reached every corner of the planet, sparking immediate global outrage. The two rival superpowers, realizing their citizens now knew the truth, were forced to halt their military standoff. The corrupt elites were swept from power, and the remaining leaders had no choice but to pool their resources, sharing technology and data openly to build a global defense against the coming cosmic threat. 2 weeks later, standing on the deck of a massive rescue vessel, Elena and Agent Chen looked out over the dark, restless ocean. The cold sea air bit at their faces, but Elena felt a sense of peace. The coming cosmic storm was still heading toward them, and the challenges ahead were monumental. But as she looked at Chen, and then back at the ship's cabin where Dr. Thorne and the other scientists were already working together, she knew they had a chance. The silent purge had failed to save the few, but it had united the many. Humanity would face the coming storm together, standing in the light.